Okay, so again, welcome to Cybersecurity and Open Source Hacktoberfest with Arachne Digital. We're happy to participate in Hacktoberfest this year, and we'll be joined by our partner, Stefan from Disarm. You'll learn a little bit more about us here in a moment. Overall, though, in this event, we're hoping that you'll learn more about the Arachne Digital team and the Disarm Foundation's work, and get an overview on open source technology's role in cybersecurity, and understand how you can begin to contribute to Arachne Digital's open source projects during Hacktoberfest. So for today, we're going to be covering just introductions and icebreakers for the people that are here. After that, we'll do the overview of open source and cybersecurity. Then we'll switch over to what our focus is going to be for this October. And then there's going to be plenty of time for questions and answers that you might have and just discussion in general. All right, so hello, my name is Vic. I go by they, them, and I'm the community manager with Arachne Digital. Outside of Arachne, I do volunteer work in open source, like civic tech spaces with an organization called Open Austin. I am based here in Austin, Texas. And outside of that, I really enjoy art and things like dream interpretation and tarot. Kay, do you want to share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Cade. So I'm one of the co-founders for Arachne Digital. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. So either is fine. I'm based in Wellington, so very different time zones. So all of Arachne Digital is in sort of like very, very scattered time zones. As far as like a lot of my spare time is sort of like working on Arachne Digital and sort of like helping to build out both like the open source side of stuff and the business side of stuff as far as what we're looking at. In the limited free time I have, I really, really enjoy like both reading and writing. So like creative fiction is something that I'm really passionate about.
Hey, Stefan, you want to share a little bit about yourself as well? I think you might be muted. It's not an event unless there are a couple of technical difficulties. We're not hearing you, so you might need to rejoin. Oh.
How's that?
There you go. That's perfect.
Working now, yeah.
All right. The headset is obviously not working. Apologies for that, guys. Yeah, I'm Stephen Campbell. I'm in the Boston area in the East Coast of the US. I'm actually working as Chief Technology Officer for the Disarm Foundation, which we'll talk about a little later. I've been a cybersecurity consultant for 10 years and in information technology for over 40 years. So showing my age, but having fun still, and that's what it's about. I've got a couple of boys who are now left home, so we're empty nesters with a bunch of cats. And I play a lot of golf and look after disabled and elderly people in my spare time. So that's me.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. And I didn't know that you had cats. I have a cat as well. So y'all might see her or hear her throughout this presentation. It is going to be near feeding time. All right, so now we'd like to learn a little bit more about the folks that are joining us. It'd be great if in the chat you can share your current location, your time, and maybe an emoji that you're vibing with. As Kate mentioned, we are all, we're like very distributed. So it is a whole other day in New Zealand, and I'm still on Friday right here in Texas. So I'd be interested to hear where y'all are at right now. Hannah, Andrea, Rick, Sankshay. And if you wanna voice it too, since we're a small group. Oh, Milan, wow. Oh, thanks for joining us so late in the day. I appreciate the military timing too. That's very helpful.
That's cool. And Andrea and I have had contact before, so it's great to see Andrea again. And Sangshay, are you in Birmingham, Alabama, or Birmingham, England?
Yeah, I like that we have to make those distinctions. Oh wow, London, it's pretty late there too.
Alabama, okay, got it. Yeah. Wow, we got Europeans. I didn't think we'd get Europeans.
I appreciate the cowboy emoji. Yeah, no. Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for sharing, y'all. All right, let's see. So yeah, we're all over, and I think that's the fun part about working open source, working digital, and what Hacktoberfest is all about, getting global contributions. All right, so as we move forward with this presentation, I just want to share the reminder about using social media. So Arachne, Disarm, and Hacktoberfest are all going to be on LinkedIn. They might exist on other platforms too, but this is our primary one. So if there's anything you learn from here, if you want to take a screenshot of the slide and share, I encourage you to tag us and use the hashtag Hacktoberfest. Oh, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and drop our LinkedIn too, if you want to join us. Cool. All right, so what is Hacktoberfest? I think most people might have found us, or actually, I'm not sure where all of y'all came from. Some of y'all could have came from our social accounts. Some of y'all could have came from the Hacktoberfest Discord. We're here organizing this event, though, as our first community event during Hacktoberfest, which is a month-long celebration of all things open source. So throughout this presentation, you'll learn a little bit more about how Arachne and Disarm work open and where we exist in those spaces. But overall, Hacktoberfest exists as a time for us to all come together and make contributions out in the open. And Kate, do you want to share a little bit more about Arachne?
Yeah, so I guess long story short, Arachne Digital, we are a cyber threat intelligence platform. So CTI is the acronym that we use for that. We go about stuff a little bit differently, and we're going to touch base on that sort of as we go through. But the primarily way that we basically look at sort of gathering up information is we look at open source threat intelligence, so information that's already in the public domain. We map that to MITRE ATT&CK, basically mapping out what we call the TTPs, the tactics, settings, and procedures. If you're not familiar with what MITRE ATT&CK is and what TTPs are and that kind of stuff, like, do not fear. We've got some slides where we're going to go through that. But basically, like, we gather up information on hackers, and we try to provide that to organizations to help them basically figure out how they should be defending their networks and that kind of stuff.
Great, thanks, Kate. And Stefan, can you share a little bit more about the Disarm Foundation?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the Disarm Foundation was started a couple of years ago to maintain and enhance a set of frameworks that were developed by Sarah Jane Terp and Pablo Brewer back in 2018 and 2019 to codify behaviors, TTPs, in the public sphere. So rather than proprietary environments that were being attacked by cyber threats, these are public threats that are coming from actors who want to manipulate us or cause some kind of harm. And so SJ and Pablo started these frameworks to standardize descriptions of those manipulative behaviors and to share intelligence on those threats. So that's the Disarm Foundation. And that's what it does. We maintain and enhance those frameworks for the open source community to use. They're for free. There's no license. They're Creative Commons, and you can use those. And we encourage folks to use them so that we can share intelligence in a structured way in order to do it, both humans and machines, to do it at speed and scale. So enough said.
Great, thanks, Stephen. And we'll have another slide too where he can share a little bit more about the work that's going on. So that's our introduction. So thank you for sticking around to learn about us. And thanks for sharing about yourself too in the chat. Hannah, I'm just seeing that you're also in Austin. All I saw was the cowboy emoji. So that's cool. Maybe we can meet up at some point. Next up, we're going to go into the open source and cybersecurity part. So I am somebody, like I mentioned earlier, I believe, who is newer to the cybersecurity part of open source. And something that I thought was interesting was that worldwide interest in cybersecurity has increased over the last 10 years. I can think of a lot of different reasons why, and I'm sure y'all can too. Maybe it's something we can chat a little bit about in the chat or in Q&A. But I thought that was interesting, especially seeing that we're actually in a space where open source has kind of done the opposite. There's been a decrease in interest worldwide. And I think we're probably all here because we see both of those things, cybersecurity and open source, as having value and being of interest. And I think it's great that Hacktoberfest can kind of bring us together to maybe start to examine some of these issues on why open source isn't as popular and maybe how we can like make these trend lines go a little closer over time. So where do we exist? We're in that middle space, like I mentioned. Open source software is maintained through collaboration, community. It's available for all of us to modify, use, and redistribute. Whereas the cybersecurity space is about protecting devices, networks, programs, etc., from digital attacks. So we're right in between those. Everything that's open source isn't going to be a cybersecurity project. Maybe they might have cybersecurity elements. I'm sure there's an argument that a lot should. And then everything that's cybersecurity isn't necessarily going to be built or made in the open. So that's kind of what makes us a little unique about where we're at right now and where we exist. But if you want to get a little bit more granular about these definitions, again, these are really big, wide worlds. Just like healthcare, there's various aspects of healthcare, cybersecurity, various aspects of cybersecurity. So we're in this space that I think Cade mentioned earlier called cyber threat intelligence. And then within that, there's also disinformation threat intelligence, which is where Disarm shines. So specifically, we're kind of looking within these bubbles that overlap, again, with the open source software. So what is cyber threat intelligence? It's the process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information about cyber threats to help organizations prevent or mitigate cyber attacks. So there's this can look a lot of different ways, but it's essentially we want to help organizations prepare so that they're not vulnerable to these attacks and to prevent them from happening. And how's that different from disinformation threat intelligence? It focuses more on the identification and of campaigns where there's like false information or deliberately spreading misinformation that can mislead others. So this might look like something like fake news, etc. All right, so within these spaces, there are different tools that exist to support, and Kate is going to share a little bit more about MITRE ATT&CK.
Okay, so for those that don't know anything about MITRE ATT&CK, so I'll give you a very sort of like high-level overview. And the reason is basically this is one of the main tools that we use with one of our open source projects on Thread. But basically, so MITRE ATT&CK, like we have a definition there that's kind of a bit of a word soup. Really, like what this is it is just a big database that just covers different hacking techniques, just different ways that hackers go about doing certain things. So it's structured in a sense of the columns that we have. We think of those as tactics. So those are sort of the high-level things that someone is going to need to do to be it to come into someone's network or to hack a website or their personal computer, whatever it happens to be that we're looking at. So if we look along the top here, so you have like reconnaissance, like you need to have some idea of what it is you're going to be hacking before you can go about that. Resource development. You're going to need some resources as far as that, potentially some tools you may want to use, some infrastructure, like maybe a server you want to use to sort of like mount your attacks from and that kind of stuff. Initial access, you need to sort of take your first step into a network. That might be through phishing, that might be through exploiting something that's internet facing that happens to be vulnerable. And it goes on and on. There's like quite a series of things you need to sort of go through. So we think of those as tactics. Underneath them, so we have all these different entries. We think of those as techniques, and those are just literally like the ways that you go about achieving that particular tactic. So there could be something like, for initial access, it could be like phishing, like sending phishing emails, or it could be exploiting a vulnerability, that kind of stuff. You'll see that each of them from this little screenshot here, each of them are marked in blue because they're all hyperlinked. And so when you click on each one of them, it'll take you into the actual information about it. And it basically gives you sort of like a procedure for how that particular technique is carried out, and that's the procedure that we think of there. So collectively, we think of this as TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Why all this is important is, like, one, it is good to be able to understand what it is that adversaries are doing. But crucially for us, each one of these entries maps to controls as far as what you want to do about it. We have what we call mitigations and detections. So ways that we can, mitigations just stop that particular technique from occurring, or detections, if we can't stop it, at least we can pick up that it occurred and then do something about that. So one, understanding the problem, but then figuring out what to do about the problem. That's sort of like the piece that MITRE ATT&CK lets us get to. And that's why it's so sort of key for what we do.
Awesome, thank you. And I wrote a note, MITRE, because I was saying MITRE, MITRE ATT&CK.
Okay.
Great, awesome, thank you, Cade. Cool, and that brings us to Thread. And Cade, that's back to you.
Yep. So Thread is, we've got a couple of different open source tools. Thread is the main one that we've been working on for Arachne Digital. So Thread is forked from MITRE's project called Tram. So basically, as far as like, we have all these different hacking techniques. So MITRE has like brought up this framework, and the way that it used to work and still does work in some parts of the world is you would basically go through free text. There would be a write-up that would talk about a particular a hacking campaign or a particular incident. And you would go through sentence by sentence and figure out, does this sentence match to any of these potentially hundreds of TTPs? And you go sentence by sentence and trying to figure that out. That is very tedious. It's very time consuming. It's not the best way to do it. So MITRE, there was 2 interns at MITRE that came up with this amazing idea that they just built some software and they would train some machine learning models on each of the different TTPs so that you could just basically ingest this free text. The free text runs through each model, and then it will tell you which of the TTPs map to that particular sentence. So you basically just get a report at the end that just says, like, these are the TTPs that are applicable. So that was an amazing project called Tram. And I guess like one of the things that we often see with government and particularly open source projects is like making stuff open is great. We've definitely encouraged government to be doing that. One of the things that government does struggle with a little bit is then being deliberate about sort of building a community around it. So Tram was released and then it kind of languished. There wasn't a lot that was being done with it. So at that point, Arachne Digital forked Tram, and we started to sort of work on our own iterations so that we could basically build a little community around it and keep it sustained. Tram later got re-released, and the architecture was very, very different. So we can't sort of merge back in any of the changes that we have made. But once again, like, it got re-released, like a sort of a big fanfare, and then it's languished again. So one of the things that we are trying to do with Arachne Digital is for like our fork, which is we've now called Thread. We're trying to be very deliberate as far as actually like making sure there are resources to build a community around the software so that the open source, like the projects will be able to continue moving forward, as opposed to being sort of like stood up with a big fanfare and then not a lot happening with them. But yeah, long story short, this is just basically our way that we map free text to that framework we just discussed as far as MITRE ATT&CK.
Awesome, thanks, Cade. And I dropped a couple links for folks in the chat if you want to explore MITRE and Thread. And as Stephen also shared what the acronym of TRAM stands for, which there are a lot of acronyms in this space. So yeah, it's something, maybe we can work on an acronym dictionary next. All right, up next, Stephen, if you can share a little bit more about the Disarm framework.
Yeah, it's great to hear Kate talk about the Tram tool and then the evolution of it with Thread. It's very exciting stuff. I've been trying to learn machine learning and some of the models there, the new transformer models and vector representations and embeddings and all that stuff. And it's really, really exciting the way the community is advancing. So Disarm is very much like MITRE ATT&CK. It actually is another acronym in the acronym soup. It stands for Disinformation Analysis and Risk Management. And it comes from a predecessor, which is another acronym called AMIT, which stands for Adversarial Misinformation, Influence, Tactics, and Techniques. So we love acronyms in this space. But Disarm is essentially the same as Kate has explained to you. There are goals that the adversary is assumed to have. And these are tactics along the top. So you'll see when you mount an influence campaign or a disinformation campaign, whatever your language is for that, you've got to decide what you want to do. What's your strategy? What's your tactics? Who do you want to target? So I'm reading across the top there, and then you want to decide which narratives do you want to propagate in order to change people's minds or to get them to do something that you want them to do. And you develop content to support those narratives. Those could be deep fakes, for example. You establish social media assets and websites, and you spoof websites potentially and make up sock puppets. Perhaps you get a couple of botnets going to automate comments, and then you let loose at some point with your campaign in the execution mode by letting, posting all that content. So that's the kill chain. We call that the kill chain. Comes from kinetic activities in the Defense Department, like dropping a bomb. What do you need to do? Well, you need to develop the weapon, and then you need to decide where you're going to shoot the weapon, and then et cetera, et cetera. So that's the concept. And down the side, again, it's, as Kate has explained so well, it's techniques about how you're going to achieve those goals. So for example, under established legitimacy, you might achieve the goal by hacking into an account and taking it over. The Chinese do this very well. You hack into an account, you take it over, and you already have a history. It looks like you are from Austin, Texas, let's say, but you're actually from Beijing. You've just hacked into an account in Austin, Texas, and taken it over, and so it looks like you're a blue-eyed American boy when you're totally not. So that's the techniques. And so it's the same concept. We want to be able to capture the behaviors and codify them in a standard way with a standard language. And that's what the Disarm frameworks are. They're a standard language for describing manipulative techniques and all of the other activities that disinformers and manipulators have to do in order to mount and execute an influence or harm campaign. Over to you, Vic.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Stephen. So that's a little bit more about like some of the tools and frameworks that we're using with Arachne Digital and our partners at Disarm. And overall, we see the tools and frameworks as supportive for transparency and collaboration for improved defense. So by us sharing all this information and these tools, we're hoping that we can build stronger systems together in the open rather than in secrecy. And do y'all have anything else to add? Y'all might want to add, Kate or Stephen, before we move into the next section.
No, I love the transparency angle. What we're trying to uncover here are manipulative actors who are covert about what they do. They're in the shadows. They're acting in the shadows to either defraud us or manipulate us. And our goal is to make everything transparent. And indeed, that's in countering disinformation. We have the danger of being a slippery slope where we try to use the bad guys' techniques against the bad guys, and that's not where we want to go. We're trying to protect democracy by shining a light on disinformation, and we want to avoid things like censorship because we want to uphold freedom of expression. And we may label content or highlight it or shine a light on it, But generally, unless it's extremely harmful or illegal, we don't want to be censoring it. Just a caveat. Over to you.
Yeah, nothing else from my side, Vic.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So up next, we're going to share a little bit more about what we're focusing on for Hacktoberfest, and then we'll have plenty of opportunities for y'all to ask questions afterwards. So right now, Arachne Digital's Hacktoberfest priorities are working to implement the Disarm framework into Thread. So we have issues tagged in our GitHub repository for Thread with Disarm, and I'll show you that here in a moment. And then the other opportunities are to contribute to Thread and the other project we have, Tracery, more broadly. They're both within the Hacktoberfest, or they're both tagged Hacktoberfest, so your contributions are part of the event. And then the third one is community. If you would like to join our community, contribute to the greater cybersecurity ecosystem or open source ecosystem, we are here as a space to hear your feedback and your thoughts as well. Oops, sorry, let's see. So again, in going with our priorities, Arachne Digital is on GitHub, and you can find a link to our GitHub in the chat. So this specifically will take you to Thread. Kay, do you have anything you might want to share?
I guess nothing specifically other than like this is the main repository that people may want to get familiar with. So there's some different elements to Thread as far as like we have a web app that you'll be able to see if you go to like our main page, and you'll see there's a link for Thread up the top there. That will take you to the web app that we sort of have stood up publicly so people can use it. You can also run Thread locally. So there's some sort of different elements to Thread that are sort of listed out as far as the different bits and pieces of this repo. And otherwise, there's quite a number of documents that we have as well that basically sort of run through stuff around like how to help contributions, looking at the roadmap for where Thread is going, and that kind of stuff. A lot of that will link to the community repo as well, with some wider sort of community documentation. And yeah, we're more than happy to take questions like over email or Slack or anything like that.
Awesome.
And then look, cool. Did you want me to jump into here, or was there? Okay, cool. So as far as the actual Disarm implementation for Thread itself, what we've done is we've broken down all the steps at a high level as far as what we see them to get Disarm implemented. So we already have MITRE ATT&CK implemented as far as like that's sort of what the software came with. And we're now looking at implementing this new framework to help us with analyzing disinformation as well. So basically, again, like at a high level, these are basically how we see the steps flowing through as far as the things we need to achieve. This may not go down to the very specifics of like exact granularity for particular things. We're very open for people to having feedback as far as like giving us ideas for how they think things should be implemented and that kind of stuff. But this is sort of like the roadmap as far as like what we see to give you some level of structure for like how we can implement Disarm into Thread moving forward.
And then as Kate mentioned, and I think I've already shared, our GitHub repository has links to Thread, Tracery, and then our community repo. Our community repo shares more about our contribution guidelines. And I know we had the question already, if we have projects to contribute for Hacktoberfest. So Thread is going to be the project that we're primarily focusing on right now. Sorry, I think my AI assistant thingy just went off. We're primarily focusing on right now, and it is tagged Hacktoberfest. So any PRs that go to this repo during Hacktober will count, if that's what you're asking, Shay. Okay, so if you're unsure where to start, because we shared a lot of information, a good first step is base stuff, which is an acronym that was created by somebody, and I'll drop a link to that in the chat. And base stuff stands for blog, apply, suggest, extend, document, evangelize, and fix. So, you might have heard some new terms or been introduced to some new toolings. Something that you might be interested in doing is maybe sharing a little bit more about this space. You know, we saw that cybersecurity is on the rise in terms of global interest, but open source is not so much. So maybe if you learned anything about how cybersecurity and open source go together, you might write a blog about it. You might actually start to apply the projects that we shared with you today. So you might use Thread, you might use the Disarm framework, or you might play with MITRE ATT&CK. We have our issues in our repository, so you can begin to explore what our focus and priorities are. And based on the issues already written, you might suggest how we can go about to complete those issues. If you see something that might be missing in the project, maybe you suggest an extension of it. Or if you're using any of these projects, you might notice that you're kind of stuck somewhere and documentation is needed. And then finally, there's evangelize, which if you're really excited about anything we shared, simply sharing about these tools and the work that we're doing in open source cybersecurity is helpful as well. And of course, fixing anything that might be broken, link, or anything else. So base stuff is just a fun way to kind of figure out where to get started or start to apply some of what you're learning. And I'm going to drop a blog post in case y'all want to learn a little bit more about base stuff. I learned about base stuff years ago, and I come from a non-technical background as a designer and communicator, so it's been really helpful for me to start to understand and work in these open source and tech spaces. So finally, Hacktoberfest, this is why we're here, so make sure if you're doing anything with us and sharing on social to tag Hacktoberfest. Details for the participation and additional resources for hacking are available on the Hacktoberfest website. So if you're just brand new to GitHub or Git or any of the open source space in general, there's a lot of resources that are linked on their site. And if you jump into our Slack, or if you find me on Discord for Hacktoberfest, I'm happy to help get you onboarded.
Shall we drop the links for our Slacks respectively?
Yeah, if you have a link that you'd like to drop, that'd be great. You can drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll do that. Let me just
And yeah, we have a form, so I will drop that in our chat as well. So yeah, we'd like you to join us. You can find us on Slack, LinkedIn, and more. Our community page on GitHub links to various information about contributions. And that is what I have. Let's see. Finally, up next is questions and answers. So are there any questions that folks have for me, Stephen, or Cade? We're happy to answer them. I have about 20 minutes, so if you'd like to go off camera and say, hey, or while you're here, or if you want to stay with your photo, that's fine too.
Yeah, I put in the Slack. I think that's good enough for reaching our Slack. Do I need an actual invite link? Just see here.
Yeah, there's not. There might be a way to create. Oh, yeah, you need to share the invitation link for Slack.
Okay, let me get that because I.
Yeah, there should be an option at the top left if you click on your.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for joining us, Hannah. I'd love to hear your feedback, either offline or in chat. And Sankshay, can you provide a little bit more context to what you mean by personal projects?
I guess to try and answer that one as well, just while we wait for Sankshay to come back with a bit more information. So like we have the repos that we've gone through that are tagged as Hacktoberfest that are for Arachne Digital. If you have, I guess, like personal projects that you want to work on and you want to see like if they interface with what we're doing, Like there might be scope for that, but my understanding is for Hacktoberfest contributions to count towards the event, the contributions would need to be in the repositories that we tagged Hacktoberfest. Need to be contributions to either like thread or tracery that we've got. Like contributing to a single project and to keep that in resume. So as far as like if you were to contribute to either like thread or tracery, like you could put that on your resume. So like something that we have had people do in the past is they've made contributions because they do want to be able to display that they have done some open source work for looking to get jobs and that kind of stuff. And they can basically link to the code base and show, hey, so this is the section of code that I've written. And you can basically see like through the different pull requests and sort of the way that it's all working through Git, you'll be able to show that, hey, this is my work. We're more than happy people to do that. Like it's open, like it's there for a reason, that it is in the public domain, people can see it. So you definitely can use contributions to our repos that you can sort of display what your work is like. And you can use that for basically showing yourself off for like resumes, wanting to do anything around sort of demonstrating your work and that kind of stuff. So we're more than happy with that.
Yeah, just to echo what Kate said, it is open source, so anything you contribute, like code-wise or writing issues, documentation within the repo, it should show up on your GitHub page. And I'm open to learning more about other ways that we can highlight contributors as well.
Yeah, we have like a small little project as far as like looking at like how we want to recognize contributors. So we actually have a file in some of the repos that will list out who some of the people that have contributed. So that's another sort of way of recognition. But like we're keen just to explore that. So if people have ideas on like how they want to be recognized, we're more than happy to take that stuff on board. So yeah.
Yeah, right now we have a blog series where we're at least recognizing our current team and people that have contributed. So it's Meet Arachne Digital, and we've been sharing that on our social.
Yeah, and maybe I can just chime in. So I talked with Vic and Kate earlier, and one of the things I'm going to do is, first thing is to download or install a thread. I've done that with Tram already and played with it. So I'm looking forward to downloading and installing Thread. All the instructions are on the GitHub. It looks pretty straightforward. You just clone the repository, you run the pip command, etc. And then I want to start playing with it and seeing what I can do with it. So maybe you guys want to do the same.
Yeah, and like we've tried to make it as easy as possible to use. We try to document it as much as we can. If you find that you are stuck and there's more documentation needed, let us know. We can add that. You may even want to like make your own pull request because that will then count towards what people are doing for Hacktoberfest. And if you just want to play with the web application, if you don't want to even download it yourself, you just want to like run the app just sort of in the browser. You can do that as well. If you go to our website and you go to Threads, that's there to play with as well. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So folks don't even need to understand Git command.
So I mean, like as far as making contributions, you probably will need to. But if you were potentially focusing more on community contributions, there's still like documentation you can submit to that's going to be less of a technical overhead for understanding like programming and that kind of stuff.
Right.
That will still be a pull request, so it will still count towards Hacktoberfest. But you may not want to sort of like, you may not be comfortable with basically like, basically cloning a Git repository, running commands in Python and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, but you still want to be doing something, we have a web app already stood up that people may want to interact with if they want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
we're trying to get as many things as we possibly can. So, yeah.
If folks are not familiar with Git, this is a great book that I recommend. It's an introduction. Of course, there's a more complicated one, but this is a cool book. I'll put the link in the chat for that. Learn version control with Git. It's a nice, simple intro.
There was a question from Hannah, just expressing surprise at the decline in interest in open source. I don't know if you've got any resources, Vic, but I know that we've had a chat about this, and it's something that we could potentially get a little bit more information around if people wanted to sort of like share that as part of the community.
Yeah, sorry, I accidentally started talking and I was on mute. But yeah, I was
Well,
getting to Hannah.
great.
Oh, you're fine. So you covered it, yeah, because I was trying to get to Hannah's question as well. I don't have any resources. This is something, Hannah, I just randomly stumbled upon because, again, I'm new to cybersecurity. So I was like, oh, what's the interest here? And then I'm like, oh, what's it in relation? And it was kind of, yeah, I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So I just did a quick Google search and I was like, well, these things make sense, but I haven't done a lot more digging beyond that. And I think that's why like spaces like Hacktoberfest are maybe important for us to continue to discuss that. And Arachne Digital, which is investing in, yeah, the larger ecosystem and community building. So things for us to explore.
And where did you get those stats from, Vic?
They come from Google Trends. So it's like looking at the worldwide trend over the course of 10 years. And you can play with the metrics on that. Like you can look at specific countries, you can look over the last like 5 years, etc. And I'll drop a link to Google Trend in case there's any other fun terms that y'all want to like explore and see what's going on. Awesome. Any other questions, y'all? If not, we can end the call and give y'all about 13 extra minutes back into your day.
I'm going to put my email address in case anybody has any questions on the Disarm stuff. Yeah, feel free to email me. I do travel a lot. I'm in Latvia next week, and I'm in Scotland the week after. But I should be able to get to email usually after 2 or 3 days.
Awesome. Any closing words, Stephen or Cade, before we head out?
No, thank you very much for pulling this together. I think, better together comes to mind. It's incredible what we can do when we join forces. And I know there's a lot of folks who are passionate about protecting the cyber environment and indeed the information environment. So let's work together.
Yeah, and if you registered through the event page, I have your email, so I'll be sending a follow-up just with the link to the slides and all these resources that we shared here in the chat. Thank you, everyone, and I hope y'all have a good evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're at.
There we go.
All right, bye.
Bye for now.